This is not only the greatest Kendrick Lamar song, but to some, the greatest rap song of all time.
Promise that you will sing about me. Promise that you will sing about me.
It's split into two parts, Sing About Me and Dying of Thirst. Sing About Me is a collection of 3 monologues relating to extreme violence in Kendrick Lamar's hometown Compton. But the most impressive thing about these monologues is that they're all based on a true story. The first monologue is someone's brother getting shot. The second monologue is about a prostitute being exploited, and the third monologue is Kendrick reflecting on his life. Then, in the second part of the song, Dying of Thirst, he raps about how everyone around him is desperately in need of God because of the horrible environment they all live in. And in this video, we're going to analyze and break down what this entire song really means. Starting with the chorus. This chorus is only repeated in part 1 of the song, which is Sing About Me. It expresses how Kendrick is mostly concerned about his legacy when he's dead, hoping to influence new artists in the future when he's gone. Hence why he begs people that they sing about him when the lights shut off. However, it's also very relevant to the next 3 monologues, and you'll understand why very shortly. Verse 1 is the first monologue, and it's wrapped in the perspective of Dave's brother. But if you haven't heard this whole album, then you probably don't even know who Dave's brother is, so let me explain everything. This track is the 10th song on the album Good Kid, Mad City. The concept of this album is a long and true story about how Kendrick and his friends are forced into living in dangerous conditions. One of the characters in this story is named Dave, and in the ending skit of the song Swimming Pools, you can hear Dave being shot and killed, as well as Dave's brother's reaction to all of this happening. There's a bit more of a story relating to this whole murder, but I want to try and avoid covering the entirety of the album. Basically, the first verse is a continuation of that story. Dave's brother is talking directly to Kendrick on the phone, the morning after the murder happened.
I woke up this morning and figured I'd call you in case I'm not here tomorrow.
During this call, Dave's brother expresses admiration for Kendrick's dream of being a rapper, and goes into detail about how Kendrick tried to save Dave's life on the day he was shot.
A fight he tried to put up, but the type of bullet that stuck had went against his will. That's blood spilled on your hands.
The line, "had went against his will, that's blood spilled on your hands," is not just referring to Dave's blood literally spilling on Kendrick's hands, but also figuratively implies that Kendrick feels he was partially responsible for Dave's death. However, Dave's brother doesn't think this is Kendrick's fault, and he says an extremely interesting and contradicting double entendre.
My plan's rather vindictive, everybody's a victim in my eyes.
By saying that everybody is a victim, Dave's brother is for one implying that he's going to hurt someone for what happened to his brother. He doesn't care if they weren't the one who shot him, he just needs someone to take his anger out on. But he's also trying to say that everyone is a victim of the hood, since growing up around so much violence has kind of forced people into this dangerous cycle of murder. This is very contradicting because it implies that even the people who killed Dave were victims to the streets. Yet Dave's brother still wants to kill them. I think this shows that he understands the constant cycle of murder in his city, but he's too emotional and angry to stop himself from getting involved in it. His understanding of this problem is represented even more in the next few lines. He mentions how he thinks the entire street mentality is stupid, and he wonders if he'll ever discover a passion like Kendrick Lamar's rapping to distract himself from the street life he's so caught up in. The following line contains some pretty impressive wordplay.
When thunder comes, it rains cats and dogs dumb.
Thunder referring to the sound of a gunshot, and raining cats and dogs referring to friends literally dropping dead. Near the end of this verse, Dave's brother claims that he's too dumb and not talented enough to be like Kendrick, pursuing his passion instead of getting involved in dangerous activity. This kind of locks in the idea that Dave is no longer going to try and get out of the streets, because he feels like he's not talented enough. And corresponding to that, this happens at the end of the verse.
Promise me you tell this story when you make it big. And if I die before your album drop, I hope.
Dave's brother did die before this album dropped. The gunshot abruptly cutting off his voice seems pretty deliberate. It goes to show that if you go down the same path as Dave's brother, you could be unexpectedly killed at any point. Verse 2 is wrapped in the perspective of a prostitute, and it actually links to one of Kendrick Lamar's older albums, Section 80. In this older album, Kendrick recorded a song dedicated to his little sister, where he tells her exactly why she should never become a prostitute. He does this by telling the story of a girl named Keisha, who became a prostitute and was exploited by the industry, and then raped and stabbed in her bladder, left to die in the middle of the street. This verse is wrapped from the perspective of Keisha's sister, who is angry at Kendrick Lamar for mentioning Keisha on his song. She claims that Kendrick is being ignorant about the whole situation and judging Keisha's past. She then explains that she too is a prostitute like Keisha, and even one of Keisha's former clients was currently behind her asking for the same service. She also says this about one of her clients.
My titties bounce on the cadence of his tingling keys. Matter of fact, he my favorite cause he tipped me with ease.
Tip me with ease, referring to tipping with ease, but also referring to tipping with the drug ecstasy, revealing that she's so stuck in her situation that she may even be a drug addict. Something quite interesting is that she says he's got a cousin named David and I seen him last week, which could be referring to Dave from the previous verse. Things get even more extreme when she implies her age with the following line.
This is the life of another girl damaged by the system. These foster homes I run away and never do miss them.
Mentioning that she runs away from foster homes would imply that she's still underage, which means that she was likely groomed into her situation. Afterwards, she tells Kendrick she doesn't want to be on his upcoming album.
And if you have an album date, just make sure I'm not in the zone, cause I don't need the attention, bring enough of that on my own.
Mentioning how much attention she gets is more of a brag than an actual plead for Kendrick not to mention her. I think this shows how getting tons of male attention from being a hooker seems to be what she uses to cope with her insecurities. She then insists to Kendrick that her lifestyle is having no effect on her health.
As a matter of fact, did I mention that I physically feel great? A doctor's approval is a waste of time, I know I'm straight.
Here she's trying to claim that she doesn't have any sexually transmitted diseases from her job, but she says a doctor's approval is a waste of time. I think it clearly shows that she's incredibly scared about knowing whether or not she has an STD, and would rather just not think about it instead of confront the problem. Also, notice how she says she physically feels great, but doesn't mention her mental health at all. She's trying to not only convince Kendrick that she's fine, but also herself, ignoring her mental problems because she's too scared to confront them. She then takes a very egotistical stance and tries to imply that she's so good at her job as a prostitute that more people remember her than Kendrick when she's dead. However, this is very quickly proven wrong as her voice slowly fades away and the verse comes to an end.
You can help me if you sell this pussy for me, nigga. Don't ignore me, nigga. Fuck your girl, nigga. Bullshit.
I think her fading away represents a lot of different things. Her eventual death, which is potentially from an STD, as that will be slowly killing her, her fading into the life of prostitution and never being able to come back, Kendrick simply walking away from the conversation since he's done with her egotistical rant, or potentially you as the listener walking away from her, proving that she's irrelevant and won't be remembered. If we take a look at the chorus again after them two verses, I think it now has another meaning. Instead of this just meaning that Kendrick wants to be remembered for rapping when he's dead, it now represents the memory of all of the victims to the streets he knew while he was growing up. And now that he's made it as an artist, he's singing about them and honouring their legacy. He's giving them recognition that he wished they could have had if they hadn't got caught up in this dangerous activity. Verse 3 is a personal reflection rapped from Kendrick's perspective. He talks about how he really hopes he's going to heaven, and mentions in this verse how he's slowly beginning to hate the person he's becoming. This is one of the most interesting lines he says in this verse.
Maybe cause I'm a dreamer and sleep is the cousin of death.
This is a very obvious reference to Nas's iconic line in New York State of Mind, "I never sleep because sleep is the cousin of death." However, being a dreamer makes you still technically conscious, just not quite awake. I think this represents being halfway between life and death, where Kendrick is faced with this choice to either focus on his passion for rapping and praise God, or get involved in gang-related activities and reject God. This is a life or death decision, and Kendrick is currently reflecting on his choices. He mentions the two stories from the previous verses once again, and explains that these traumatic experiences is what fuels his lyricism in his music. He then explains that the actions of Keisha's lifestyle will continue to affect 20 generations below her. This will be due to her lack of educational success and financial stability. Kendrick then links these stories to himself, and says the exact same thing would be happening to him if he wasn't rapping, which reveals that rapping is some kind of coping mechanism for Kendrick that he can put his emotions into, rather than turning his emotions into actions and getting himself involved in violence. He tells anyone in the same position as Keisha or Dave's brother to fight for your rights even when you're wrong, meaning regardless of any wrongdoing you may have done, still try to fight for a different reality and get yourself out of this dangerous environment. Finally, he ends the verse by questioning himself.
Am I worth it? Did I put enough work in?
I think this can represent a lot of different things. It could represent him asking God if he's paid off the sins he's committed. It could represent him hoping that he put enough work into his rapping. Or perhaps it could even be him asking the listener if he's worth being on this song, which is supposed to be dedicated to those who have been through an intense amount of hardship. questioning if his story is anywhere near as significant as the others. Then the song cuts back to the chorus and an outro, before changing to the second part, Dying of Thirst. Part 2 of the song starts with a skit of Kendrick Lamar's friends, talking after Dave was just murdered. Some of them want to get revenge, and under all of this tension, Dave's brother snaps and just yells,
"Fuck, I'm tired of this shit. I'm tired of fucking running. I'm tired of this shit. My brother, homie."
The part you just heard resembles Trey from Boys in the Hood crying after his friend got shot.
I'm so fucking tired of this shit. Fuck this shit. Stupid motherfucker. Fuck you. Fucking dirty as shit.
You'll notice that he's someone that Kendrick seems to find himself associating with quite a lot in these verses. Kendrick starts the first verse by saying the following.
Tired of running, tired of hunting, my own kind, but retiring nothing.
This is expressing how he's tired of this never-ending cycle of violence that him and his friends are forced to take part in. At the end of each of these verses, Kendrick repeats the line, "Dying of thirst," which refers to when someone is desperately in need of God, with thirst referring to the need for holy water or to be baptized. However, there may also be a thirst for blood among Kendrick's peers, as Dave was just killed and they're seeking revenge. The second verse is likely a reference to Keisha from Keisha's song, where Kendrick Lamar says the following.
Dope on the corner, look at the coroner, daughter is dead, mother is mourning,
This may be referring to Keisha dying on the streets, or perhaps people in the exact same position as her. He also makes another reference to Trey from Boys in the Hood. In the movie, Trey is a character who's being portrayed as smart and charismatic, trying to avoid gang affiliation and just get by, which is pretty much equal to the position that Kendrick is in this song. In verse 3, Kendrick raps about how he's committed too many sins. He explains that he has dreams of having lots of money, but it's incredibly hard to get this money because of the environment he's living in. A really good line in this verse would be, "The Reaper callin', I'm Cottonmouth."
The Reaper calling, I'm Cottonmouth.
This is a pretty impressive double entendre, where the Reaper is a type of machine that gathers crops such as cotton, but it also refers to the Grim Reaper taking Kendrick's life. The term Cottonmouth refers to slavery, but it also refers to having a dry mouth, meaning dying of thirst. I think with this line he's implying that it's the fault of the racist American system that he has to live in this awful environment. At the end of this verse, rather than just repeating dying of thirst, he instead repeats die your thirst. I think this means that rather than just quenching your thirst in God, you should also try to transform your struggle into something else. For example, pursuing a passion to cope with your struggles, such as rap music like Kendrick does, rather than getting yourself involved in gang-related activity. In the fourth verse, Kendrick questions what his hood is even doing, and he emphasizes that the consequences of killing each other will result in burning in hell for eternity. However, he also sympathizes with the idea that most people in the hood never even learnt how to live righteously. In the final verse of this song, Kendrick continues to reflect on his need for God, saying that it's gotten so bad that he needs a well for his drought. He asks us the following question.
What if today was the rapture and you completely tarnished?
The rapture refers to the Christian belief that one day Jesus will take all believers into heaven before the end of the world. Kendrick is saying here that most people in the hood aren't actually thinking about what's going to happen in the end because they're so caught up and distracted by the violence. The song finally comes to an end when Kendrick says this line.
Dying of thirst, so hop in that water and pray that it works.
I think here Kendrick is directly telling people to accept God into their life. However, he still seems to have a little bit of uncertainty. Kendrick says pray that it works, which brings attention to his own struggles with faith growing up in such a violent environment, as well as showing that he's doing this out of a state of despair. But this track doesn't end yet. There is one final skit. This skit is believed to include the now deceased poet Maya Angelou, who is widely considered as one of the greatest American poets of all time. In the skit, Dave's brother and some of his friends are incredibly angry and upset over Dave's death. But then suddenly an older woman, who is allegedly Maya Angelou, confronts them as she sees one of the boys is holding a gun. She then asks the boys why they're so angry and explains that they're all dying of thirst. Then she gets them to repeat a prayer after her.
And I humbly repent for my sin.
What's incredibly interesting about this ending skit is that this is a real encounter Maya Angelou had with Tupac. Since at one point she ran into Tupac when he was about to get into a confrontation with another man, and she managed to talk him out of it.
I said to him, may I speak to you? And he was cursing I wouldn't give a... I said, I understand that, but let me speak to you. If these mother... I said, I got you. However, let me speak to you. And finally, I said, when was the last time anyone told you how important you are? Did you know our people stood on auction blocks, were sold, bought and sold? Did you know, so that you could stay alive today? And finally, he heard me and stopped talking and started to weep. And I put my arms around him and I walked him back into the arena.
Much like Tupac, Dave's brother also died in the end, revealing that praying is entirely useless if you don't have faith. If you want to see another analysis video, check out this video about Kanye West's song. If he dropped it, then he'd be dead right now, maybe. It's a pretty interesting video. Goodbye and subscribe.